Okay, here we are, PlayStation 5 Pro. 3 minutes to go, and last minute predictions, just predictions in general, because this presentation we found out yesterday was only going to be about 9 minutes long. I think they're maybe just trying to approach this in a more consumer-facing way, so perhaps 9 minutes will be a mix of some definitely Mark Cerny technical deep dives, which I like, but maybe they want to start avoiding these things that we used to expect throughout PlayStation history. You know, they always caught flack for these weird things where, like, they always did this every console generation, which would be like talking an hour about a new console but never showing the hardware design, or talking about price right away. Or in the case of Road to PS5, going into that deep dive technical analysis and then everyone wondering what the hell was that, which it was clearly was not for consumers. So I imagine they're maybe trying to finally take that feedback in 5 consoles later and having more of a consumer-facing show where it's really dressed up in a way where it's like this. It's a more tighter show. 9 minutes long. Probably going to see some demonstrations. Mark's already talking about PSSR. I'm sure they'll show the hardware design. What I don't know is, are we going to see this thing like go up for pre-order right away? Are they going to talk about price? I mean, is that already going to be like out the door in this 9 minutes? Is all that stuff going to come after on the PlayStation blog? I don't know, but I would say that if we're going to see price today, I'm expecting $599 at the lowest, $649 at the highest. I'm inclined to say there won't even be a disc console version. Now, there's a Twitter account that popped up last minute that was, I think, implying that we would get 2 models. The only reason why I say we won't even get a disc console is simply because they can manufacture a digital edition and sell the disc drive separately. So there'll always be the option to give this thing disc playability, but I don't know. I feel like they're going to want to make sure this MSRP is as low as possible and not have a console that's in theory like $699 just because the optics look bad, even though they would be offering a digital console. So that's sort of where I sit on the whole thing, but we'll find out if I'm excuse me, Jesus. We'll find out if I'm right, because it's starting in 50 seconds.
Hi, I'm Mark Cerny. I'm excited to be here to talk about the newest addition to our console lineup, PlayStation 5 Pro, and how it advances gaming technology. But first, I want to take just a minute to look at what we put in the original PlayStation 5 and how it delivers an exceptional gaming experience. When PS5 debuted in 2020, it brought a lot to the table. 8 Zen 2 CPU cores form the brains of PlayStation 5 and enable high-speed complex gameplay, with character counts reaching into the hundreds and frame rates that can be as high as 120 frames a second. PS5 has a powerful RDNA 2 GPU, which can render anything from intricate details to fantastic worlds with vast panoramas to explore. Ray tracing allows for dramatic visual improvements, including reflections off of water or glass, and the realism that comes from real-time global illumination. A custom SSD can load data at breathtaking speed, resulting in ultra-fast transitions between game worlds and data streaming rates so high that traversal speeds are essentially unlimited.
You okay? I'm working on it!
Tempest 3D audio tech brings an unparalleled sense of immersion to the sound of the games. With audio so real, you may not even need to see the enemies to know exactly where they are. Finally, the DualSense controller has haptics that let you feel through your hands what your character is experiencing inside of the game. It's wonderful to see such variety and richness of game experiences. Creators have made amazing use of the hardware capabilities, but when I talk to them, I do hear about their desire for more graphics performance. The dreams of the developers are bigger than can be supported at 60 frames per second, and that leads to an aspect of modern gaming that we're all familiar with: graphics modes. It can be a difficult choice for players.
Can it?
Fidelity modes emphasize the visuals, typically through higher resolution rendering. These modes might also have enhanced detail or use more ray tracing. But the games only run at 30 frames per second. The visuals can be choppier and the controls less responsive. Performance modes emphasize frame rate and interactivity, typically choosing to run 60 frames per second, mainly by reducing the graphical detail until those frame rates can be achieved. When asked to decide on a mode, players are choosing performance about 3/4 of the time. Removing that decision, or at least narrowing that divide, is one of the key targets for PlayStation 5 Pro. We want to give players the graphics that the game creators aspire to, at the high frame rates that players typically prefer. To do that, PS5 Pro substantially improves over PlayStation 5 in 3 ways. Here's what we call the Big 3. First, we made the GPU much larger and increased the speed of the memory it uses. The result is rendering that's up to 45% faster.
45%.
Second, we made major upgrades to the ray tracing, taking a streamlined and accelerated approach that allows calculation of the rays at double or even triple the speeds of PlayStation 5. And finally, we added custom hardware for machine learning and an AI library called PlayStation Spectral
Super Resolution,
or PSSR for short.
Pisser.
PSSR analyzes the game images pixel by pixel and can add an extraordinary amount of detail, which boosts the effective resolution of the games. Game creators are adding PS5 Pro support to new and existing titles, and with the Big 3 involved, the results can be pretty amazing, with graphics showing something like fidelity levels of detail, but at double the frame rate. Here's The Last of Us Part 2 running on PS5 Pro. It has huge amounts of detail and targets a super smooth 60 frames per second. Let's compare this to the fidelity mode on PS5, which is only running at 30 frames per second and is therefore much choppier. This goal of delivering almost fidelity-like graphics at performance frame rates has been achieved for a broad set of titles, including Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. We can see that PS5 Pro is close to doubling the power of PlayStation 5. Another way to compare the two consoles is to look at PS5 Pro versus Performance mode on PS5, both of which target 60 frames per second. What we see here is a difference in detail. PS5 Pro is much sharper and crisper than PS5. For this, my favorite is the parade scene from Ratchet & Clank. Distant details are much clearer. And here we can see Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is noticeably higher resolution throughout the scene, including the trees and procedural cars. So overall, some remarkable improvement to the games. On PS5 Pro, we can see increased sharpness to the graphics or smoother and more responsive gameplay. This is the Big 3 showing their value. As you've been seeing, machine learning via the PSSR library is being used quite broadly to add pixel detail and boost frame rate. But there are as many approaches as there are game engines. The increase in raw GPU power is being especially effective for Horizon Forbidden West. Apart from the detail boost, that extra graphics power is allowing for improvements to lighting and visual effects, as well as to the hair and the skin in cinematics.
Open up, guys. Jorv's orders.
Good enough for me.
Ray tracing is finding broad usage as well, particularly when the games are focused on higher frame rates. The faster hardware in PS5 Pro can make a real difference, allowing Gran Turismo 7 to add ray-traced reflections between the cars in gameplay, while continuing to support their targeted 60 frames per second. That boost in ray tracing is also delivering big wins for Hogwarts Legacy, allowing not only for better
first third-party game
and a greater variety of reflective surfaces, but also for
so far this is exactly
of shadows.
what I've been expecting.
I hope you've enjoyed this run-through of the technology behind PlayStation 5 Pro. Simply put, it's the most powerful console we've ever built, and a worthy addition to the PS5 family. Let me wrap this up by giving you a quick look at a number of games running on the new console.
Hey, they're gonna do a design reveal. This is like beat for beat what I just outlined. Very consumer focused. There it is, it's taller. And first party is gonna be exactly what they're going to show this thing off with. First party is always going to be your big example. but nice to have some Rebirth in there. So you want to show the third parties as well. I'm sure Rebirth will definitely benefit from it. Demon Souls, okay. That's a game I could not play on Fidelity. I will play on Fidelity occasionally. It really depends on the game. Ratchet, I had no problem doing that. Most other things, I gotta do 60. I'm actually surprised he said a quarter of a... What do you say? Three quarters of people are picking performance mode. I would have assumed a little bit higher than that, even. Oftentimes, performance is the default option anyway. Just by sheer default settings, most people are walking into performance mode nowadays. To go out of your way and pick fidelity is, you know, not nearly as common. Now, will they talk about price? Will pre-orders go up right away? That's what I want to know. They're only showing a digital edition. $6.99 without a disc drive. Oh god, that's brutal. Oof, that is brutal. Yeah, that's why there's no disc console. It's what I was thinking, but man, $6.99, that's up there. Oh boy, I thought worst case scenario we were looking at $6.49. That's gonna sting. But you know, hot off the video, it just finished. It's an enthusiast console. I will say the same points I've been saying ever since this thing, the rumors started popping up, because there's really not much to say about what we just saw. The console is beat for beat exactly what has been outlined thus far, because the console has not been a secret. The developer documentation told us everything about that. It was more a matter of, I guess, how they were going to talk about this thing. It seems like they did approach it, and my very quick predictions of like, it's going to be a very tight consumer focused show. Let's explain all these things. Not necessarily a Mark Cerny deep dive, which I was still hoping they would end up doing. I'm sure stuff is going to pop up on the PlayStation blog any second, but $6.99's pretty brutal. I'm sure that's not going to go over well with people at all. Although I expect the console will still probably sell out, because it is an enthusiast machine. It's not meant to be super high volume. It's meant for very engaged PlayStation customers. So I know the immediate thing is like, do we need this thing? No, we don't. We don't need this. This thing's ridiculous. A lot of complaints about this generation and the games that we're getting and everything like that. And I can always sympathize with those remarks, but it's an enthusiast console. It's just like PS4 Pro. More so in this case, right? Because PS4 Pro came at a time where there was mass adoption of 4K televisions. In this case, I mean, they're really kind of getting into the minutia of, okay, just higher frame rates, sustained resolutions, base resolution targets with PSSR. This thing is going to be... I'm curious if they'll be able to, I guess, see the same return of like 1 out of every 5 PS5 consoles is going to be a Pro model moving forward, right? That was the metric for PS4 Pro. Because selling at $700 without a disc drive is that's a high average spend per box. So you're talking to very engaged customers that want to, you know, these are people that buy multiple games a year. They're subscribed to Plus. They're your hardcore customers. That's what this thing is speaking to. So, do you need it? No, of course you don't need it. You never needed it. You didn't need a PS4 Pro. But if you're a really engaged customer and you're willing to pay that cost, then I'm sure the machine's going to perform reasonably well, especially with all those first-party games. If anything, I'm surprised Ragnarok was not on there. I would have thought Ragnarok would also show up as well, but most of like the heavy-hitter PlayStation Studio games on PS5 so far from the internal studios did show up with the trailer, which is expected. That's my initial gut thought. I guess we'll wait to see if anything pops up on the PlayStation blog here. Twitter is having a field day already. $6.99. It is a lot of money. I didn't think they'd go to $6.99. I really didn't. Because it's an optics thing. It looks so bad when it's $700 and it's no disc drive. It's like, that's why you can't even offer a console with a disc drive, because then that's going to be conceivably $749.99. You would have to do it that way, by the way, because the disc drive's already like $80 USD. So it's not going to be like a $100 price differential. But you know, if you're going to do 2 SKUs, or technically it's one actual model, but just a separate box that they're selling at retail. If you're going to do that way, you're going to have 2 price points, $649, I would have thought, at the high end, and then not even offer a disc console, so you don't have to offer a machine that's $700. But that is wild. You know what's interesting is that there also, this news just came in of refurbished PS5 Slim consoles showing up on PlayStation Direct, and that is those are starting at like $349, which is like super cheap for a standard base console nowadays if you don't mind refurbished, which refurbished also will have a warranty, so that's actually a pretty big deal. Okay, so from the PlayStation blog, here are some extra details about the console. It is going to have the PS5 Game Boost option, so that's going to apply to all games, including the, quote, 8,500 PS4 games that are backwards compatible on the console. There's also going to be enhanced image quality for select PS4 games to improve resolution on those games. I assume they're talking about games with a sort of dynamic res, so it'll hopefully sustain the higher end of that dynamic resolution. Wi-Fi 7 is standard in the console. VRR and 8K gaming is going to be supported as well, and we all know that's still probably a pipe dream, but they are still talking about 8K gaming. I don't know if we'll have many examples of that ever showing up. There are going to be free patches for the following games so far: Alan Wake 2, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Demon's Souls, Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Gran Turismo 7, Hogwarts Legacy, Horizon Forbidden West, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, The Crew Motorfest, The First Descendant, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, and more. The height is the same as the original PS5, so this thing sounds about the same profile and footprint of that console. Players can add a disk drive, the one that's currently on the market right now, or they can swap out console covers when they become available, and that's the language they used. So it sounds like this thing might be wider, and therefore the current console covers that are available for the PlayStation 5 Slim might not fit on this thing, so that would have made sense when we were theorizing that based on the sketch that came out. But the language here is implying that there's going to be another separate lineup of covers that you'll have to buy for this console. But they are saying that the existing disk drive that you do have, that can go in, or the one that you can buy right now. But in theory, if you're looking to upgrade from a PS5 Slim with a disk drive right now, you could in theory just hold on to the one you have, and therefore you'll be good to go. But then you'll have to sell a console without a proper cover on the end of it, so not sure how that would look. 2 terabyte SSD is standard. Not going to be a full usable 2 terabytes, but probably 1.8 something. Pre-orders begin September 26th, and PS Direct retail, that's where you can pre-order the console, releasing on November 7th. So that's where we're at. PlayStation 5 Pro. Quite frankly, it's the price. It's a lot, even for an enthusiast machine. I'm already seeing people have a field day with that price. PlayStation 3 is $599. It's been blown out of the water. Now we're $100 more in 2024. Now, of course, inflation it's a different story nowadays. PS3 back in 2006, that was still an absolutely nutty price point. And the context here is clearly different because they offer consoles that are cheaper. But I'm sure this thing will still reasonably do well. It's meant to be for really engaged customers. I still think we could have went this entire console cycle without PlayStation 5 Pro. That's not even so much a knock at it. Obviously, I'll get one and do coverage for the channel, and I am a very engaged customer, so this is a console that I would be into. But it's a lot of money, and it sucks. If anything, I think we could have went another 4 years without it, and then that sort of, expected graphics leap that we don't necessarily have nowadays because we have diminishing returns. Any sort of expected hardware jump that we could have between generations, now there's another half step. But we're in a different environment nowadays where consumers are a lot more mindful of just improving their games, having them look pretty. I mean, it's still such a baffling thing nowadays that, like, 20 something years ago, frame rate was like the vast majority of people didn't know about it, didn't care about it. Well, console gamers, mind you. And nowadays it's like a very big marketable thing. So that's why PlayStation 5 Pro, I think, does exist in this marketplace. But I'm going to leave it there. If there's any other details that we missed, we'll cover it on Let's Talk PlayStation this coming Friday. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. You take it easy.